Today is January 26, 2018. This is the meeting of the Kubernetes CSI implementation group. Let's go to the agenda. First up is PRs that we want to discuss. Looks like we haven't had anybody add anything. Feel free to add anything here as we go through the meeting. Any updates on this small bug, Luis? Looks like Luis is not with us, but that's fine. Let's just go to updates. Is there anything that anybody wants to give an update on? Also, before that, I want to apologize for being delinquent over the last few days. If you pinged me, I haven't gotten back to you. I was in a summit. I'm back now, and I'll be going through my Slack messages and inbox, so hang tight.
Yeah, I don't have any updates.
Okay. I think everybody's deep in implementation right now.
Yeah, actually one update is iSCSI attach actually Shilpa tried it out.
Mm-hmm.
Joined the call, but she didn't make it. So iSCSI attach is important.
Oh, nice. Is this the case for all implementations of iSCSI or just the one that you happen to test?
This is the case for all because it's a client side, right? So it's a Linux property. So
okay.
iSCSI ADM. So I think it's the same behavior even in things like NetBSD. That's what I remember, but yeah.
Interesting. Okay, so that's a good data point.
And EFC, if you want, yeah, I can ping rootfs and maybe get something input from her if he has any idea.
Okay, cool. That would be great, actually, if you could do that.
Yeah, let me do that. Yeah.
Is David on the line? Yes. Yeah. David, I haven't gotten a chance to read your messages. Do you want to talk about the mount device stuff and bring folks up to date about this discussion?
Sure. Yeah. Give me a second.
Sure. No problem.
Yeah. So I don't know if everyone's familiar with the mount device. Have you all taken a look, or do you want me to go over what it is real quick?
It might be worth just giving a quick intro.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So it's just a proposal to add a mount device equivalent step in CSI. So it's kind of like it's a per volume per node setup step. We're proposing to call it node stage volume. So it's basically just like a mount inside the node that you need to do not per workload, but just per node, that then for each publish you can bind mount that mount point to the workload. And basically one of the big problems right now, or one of the problems getting into the spec, is there's some pushback on whether this is actually necessary. Like how many storage plugins are going to use this new RPC. And actually in exploring this, I've noticed that I believe that one of the main confusions is over access modes, actually, because in Kubernetes we allow single node access mode plugins to actually be published at multiple workloads on the same node. Whereas in the CSI spec, if you read the spec word for word, I think it actually doesn't allow this functionality. It's kind of worded as single node access mode volumes have to be mounted in only one workload or a one mount point total. And so this per node stage volume call RPC is not useful for any single node volume in CSI as it currently stands. My argument is that it shouldn't actually be like this. Volumes that are single node volumes that are mounted to a node should be accessible by any workload on that node. And if that is true in CSI, then this node stage volume call will be much more useful, and in fact needs to be used by a whole bunch of different storage plugins. So I think, this needs to be discussed with a more general group as well, like the CSI spec group or something on the Wednesday. Curious to.
Sorry.
Yes.
Quick question. Is it related to the basically being able to count the number of mount done by the workload to a specific volume?
Right. So node stage volume would shift the reference counting from the storage plugin to the CO for when you have multiple workloads mounting the volume on a node. So, for example, you have one volume mounted to 3 workloads. As it currently stands, the storage plugin needs to keep track of how many volumes are mounted. And when the last one is unmounted, then they can get rid of some sort of the global mount that exists. Whereas with this RPC, the node stage volume would take care of this global workload, this global node mount. And each node publish volume only has to worry about bind mounting it to each workload. Did that make sense?
Yeah, perfectly, because it will save a very costly operation of basically going to the sys and see if there are any references to the specific volume. If we can get the reply back right away with the it's used or not used, it's going to be much better, of course.
Right. So it's going to save some trouble for the storage plugin, but the problem is how much trouble will it save? With the current access mode definition, I think this will only be useful for plugins such as iSCSI, Fiber Channel, and some of the other ones that have some of the other block devices that have multi-node support.
That would be useful for Ceph as well. And I can tell you right away that Rook people will not be happy, or they're not going to be happy with the CSI limiting access to the volume on per node basis. That's 100% guaranteed.
You're saying they would not be happy if single node access volumes are
correct.
Not accessible by multiple workloads.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Because that's currently part of the spec, and I think that should be changed as well.
I think that's great investigation. I think I'm not sure how exactly I feel about this. On the one hand, I felt like the fact that Kubernetes allowed this use case was a little bit of a mistake because the way that it's currently implemented, it can cause non-deterministic behavior. So if your volume, if your pods all happen to be scheduled onto the same node, they will all be able to mount the volume. But if any one of them lands on a different node, only the first node to get the volume, the pods on that node will work. The other pods on the other node are not going to be able to mount. That seems like bad behavior that we should get away from. But at the same time, we can't break backwards compatibility. And arguably, I can see the argument that Sergey and David are making, which is, there could be use cases where you want to be able to have multiple workloads use a single volume from the same node. Just because Kubernetes doesn't handle it in a very graceful manner doesn't mean that it can't be improved. For example, we could modify the Kubernetes scheduler to have some sort of data gravity that causes these volumes to all be scheduled onto the same node, or they could use the feature the persistent volume affinity work that's being done, the topology work to limit to do this limiting. So I think it's
one clarification.
Well, go ahead.
Sorry, one quick clarification. Today, what is the access mode which will make it work for Kubernetes?
What is the access mode in CSI?
No, in the Kubernetes side, right? Which will make it work which will allow me to specify saying that, okay, I have a volume which can be read-write by multiple pods on a single node.
So Kubernetes, the API doesn't explicitly allow or disallow it. Is part of the problem. So we have access modes in the API, and if we look at these, let's just look at that. There's read write once, read write many, read write once, read only many, and read write many. The problem is that basically what these are used for is binding a persistent volume to a persistent volume claim. Once that happens, Kubernetes doesn't actually enforce it. So you could have something which is marked as read write once and go ahead and reference it from multiple pods. Kubernetes will happily go and attach it. One caveat is
binding will fail, right? Or
what's that?
Sorry, will the binding fail or no?
The binding will be happy because your PV, PVC both say that they want read write once.
Okay.
But then once your PV, PVC is bound, then you can go and reference it from multiple pods, even though it's read write once. So there's no validation. But the caveat there is there was some validation added, I believe, in the attach detach controller for the Azure disk case, because they really wanted this enforcement. So there's some enforcement that was added, but it's very hacky and doesn't necessarily work very well for all volume plugins.
Actually, that's a great point. Actually, if I want to have a node affinity, then actually I can make it to work, or some workloads, right? Okay.
You could, yeah. You could force them all to land on a single node, and then it would work.
Okay, I see your point. Okay.
So yeah, I think it's an interesting use case. We can propose this to the community, the CSI community, and see what they think of basically being more flexible in the wording of what is and is not allowed. And therefore, we can allow this use case where a single node volume can be used by multiple workloads on that node. It seems like a plausible use case. If we have some concrete examples of where this would be helpful, that would help the argument. So maybe if Sergey, for Ceph and the ones that you mentioned, if you could share with David the concrete examples, that might be useful.
Also, one other thing I noticed was the naming of these access modes is different between CSI and Kubernetes. So in CSI, it's kind of weird because it says single node read write. So that would actually lead me to believe that you can publish the single node read writes to multiple workloads on the volume, just from a naming perspective. So even if we don't end up changing what these access modes mean, I think they're named incorrectly for the current behavior, right? Because they're referring to single nodes.
Yeah, that's a very good point. And in fact, the way that it is currently spec'd, if it is talking about nodes, it doesn't necessarily say anything about workloads.
Right, but I actually, so if I can direct your attention to the, there's like part of the spec that has like T1 equals to T2, T1 not equals to T2, that kind of stuff. If you look at that I think T is the target publish path. And so for non-multi-node, which is the single node ones, as long as T1 doesn't equal T2, it's a failed precondition according to the spec. And that would be a multiple workload, same node situation.
Got it. Okay, so that is worth clarifying. All right, cool. Great investigation, and let's continue following up here. Does anybody in this group disagree about this direction? Okay, cool. Then David will continue.
One another solid use case for this would be like a backup jobs. If you want to have another backup job and you want to have an affinity towards your workloads, then ideally you will have them on the same node and you want to access the same file system or block device with different access permissions.
Yeah.
You see my point? Like a backup job wants to attach the same device, but it need not have a read-write permission. It might just
I'm
want
going
to
to
have
try to play devil's advocate a little bit. Can a backup job execute while the disk is in use, or would that result in an inconsistent backup?
Yes, it can actually, because it can be a file system backup, as simple as that.
Yeah. But if yeah, do people actually do that?
Yes, a lot.
Well, I guess if you're not running in containers, you just have a single process that's running, writing stuff to the disk, and you have a backup process that's running in the background and periodically.
Yes, it has a. Typically, they have a backup agent. If you look at the net backup or backup exec, which are like one of the industries may well known, so they will run a backup agent, and the backup agent actually all it does is it goes through and figure out based upon the change times of the modified times of the files. It'll discover to take only those backups and all that stuff. So they can, some of them even do a file system level scan complete.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Okay, so that's a good point. Solid use case that you can use.
There was another case. I mean, in the past, what we were trying to do is to run MariaDB in the container and accessing the persistent volume. And the idea was to bring up the second MariaDB with the new version and point it to the PV. Then shook the first one, and but so far, I mean, we couldn't accomplish it at that time. So, but with this functionality in CSI, basically we should be able to mount it.
Yeah, basically bring up a newer version of application and
Correct.
use the same set of data before you tear down the old one.
Yep.
Will it work? MariaDB has the ability to have a data source lock of the data source and both of them trying to work?
We never succeeded. We went with the different solution, but the hope is that by having this functionality working properly, we should have been able to achieve that.
You could probably build it into Kubernetes, the ability to have some sort of like leader election or something, and do a handoff where both workloads come up, one stands down if the other one's working.
Yeah.
And then
actually, I agree.
A handover. You don't have any downtime.
Yeah, graceful handoff. Okay.
Yeah, but even that I think is a little bit funky because realistically, you should not ever depend on zero downtime for one particular instance. I think both of these cases are good, but they have caveats. They're kind of like to poke holes in it. Okay. Anything else folks want to talk about this topic or anything else?
There's one of the guys here posted a PR. Let me get it. I'll put it in a document. But basically, it's Chris. He's the PR is for the external provisioner to basically allow specifying the length of the volume name and the prefix of the volume that is created, because some providers like Scale.io has limitation on the name of the volume that is generated. Right. And the default name that was being generated was too long. Let me get that PR.
Okay, that actually sounds like a bug, so let's move it to the bug section.
Did it come up for you? Let me get it. I thought maybe you had it.
Okay.
I was just looking at it. I'll put it. You said put it under bug.
Yeah, if you just throw it in here in the first line
Okay.
or somewhere. Yeah.
There you go.
Okay. Cool.
So it's just something to keep an eye on.
Cool. Cool. Ah, Chris. Okay, looks good to me. Who wants to be responsible for reviewing and LGTMing this?
I took a first stab at it, but somebody else should look at it too.
Okay. Can we get Jan or Brad to take a look at it?
Yeah, I think one of those guys should.
Okay.
Because it calls for adding, or the way Chris is implementing it, it calls for adding 2 CLI flags. So they definitely, as the originator, should take a look.
Okay. Sounds good. All right, we have 5 minutes left in the meeting. Anything else you guys want to discuss?
Yeah, a couple of things, if I could. During the CSI meeting, there was some couple of things about the some cleanup on the spec, and I took a stab at it and I pushed the PR 176. It's in the list of PRs. So if you could just take a look at it to see if I'm going in the right direction.
For sure. Yeah, I'll take a look at that.
Yeah, and the second thing is that the credentials. So there was lots of discussions, and it would be great to have another sync up with you sometime when you have time, because I feel like there's a huge resistance from Jordan.
Oh, okay.
And maybe because I don't understand what he wants.
Okay.
So it would be great if we could again sync up and
Yeah. Okay, let me do that. I'm going to try to review the design either today or Monday, and then we can set up a meeting at some point next week, hopefully with me, you, and Jordan. And then
that would be excellent.
finalize the design. Okay. Sounds good to me. All right. Is anybody blocked on anything?
Hey, Saad.
Hello. Is this?
Hey, Saad, can you hear me?
Yes. Oh, hey, it's
Yeah.
Nick.
Yeah. I want to say something about the volume attachment API promotion.
Yes.
Yeah, I know you have talked to Jordan, and I'm not sure if we still need to add two informers for different kinds of APIs in authorizer.
Okay. I haven't had a chance to look at that PR. So the last time I looked at it, my understanding was that the authorizer would look at the version that that was hard coded. Was there a comment by Jordan or somebody else saying that was not the case, or?
Yeah, Charles
Okay.
and Jordan has commented on the PR, and they both think we should just add beta API versions for it.
Okay. Okay. Jordan's the man on that, so most likely that's correct. Let me follow up on that PR, and I will comment on it. I'll try to do that right after this meeting.
Yeah, I'll put a PR link in the tasks, and it's ready for another review.
Perfect. Okay, I'll take a look at that.
Yeah, thank you.
I actually have a quick question as well.
Sure.
Does anyone have the experience injecting credentials into a storage plugin that I could ask about?
Is there anything in particular you
well, I'm writing the GC storage plugin right now, and I'm having a little bit of trouble getting the right credentials to it so that it can actually, create and delete volumes.
Okay. Is the problem the mechanism by which you surface the credential, or where to get the credential from to begin with?
Both. I haven't actually spent very much time looking into it, but I was just
Okay.
wondering if anyone had experience.
I don't have experience building the volume plugin. Chakri or Luis might have more experience there, but my overall recommendation from a design perspective is that in the volume plugin, you can expose the credentials as a secret or a file, a secret as an environment variable or file, and then have your volume driver pick up that secret and use it. So that part should be easy. The difficult part is going to be
you mean a secret reference, right?
But it breaks CSI. What you're saying now, it breaks CSI idea. You cannot touch secret from your plugin. You cannot use any CO dependent call.
No, I mean, I think it means that the secret gets mounted as a file, and then the
right.
driver gets to read it as a file in file system.
Right.
Okay, so you want to mount as a, okay. Because what we've done on SF, we leverage storage class and we pass the user ID and the reference to the secret.
So the only time you should pass the credentials through the CSI API is if they are specific to the particular operation. If the credential is generic, meaning the same credential will be used for all operations, then it should be injected into the container somehow.
Yeah.
And I think the recommendation in the spec is to have that be an environment variable. Plugin configuration should be specified by environment variables whenever possible. So for example, you can write your CSI driver container to expect the credentials at a specific environment variable. How that environment variable is populated is going to be different from environment to environment. But as far as the driver itself is concerned, it doesn't care how it got there. It just knows that in this environment variable, I will have my credential and I am going to be happy. In the case of Kubernetes, we will use the Kubernetes secret API to inject that environment variable, but that's just a deployment detail for Kubernetes.
Sounds good. All right, thank you.
Hi, I'd like to add one more. Today, right, most of the GC and AWS, they use a cloud provider.
Yep.
And they get most of the authentication from there. But for this, since it's going to be a separate plugin, I was looking at it. We should actually maybe refer to ingress controller or something and see what they're following. Maybe we can just use that model.
Yeah,
because
very good.
From the user experience, today they just configure a cloud provider, and how do you make sure a plugin also has access to it?
Yeah. One more thing. So that's a very, very good point, and that's probably exactly where we should start for the first iteration of this. In the future, something interesting to consider might be the Open Service Broker API. I've been looking into this more and more to try to understand, one, what the heck it is, and two, what the overlap with Volume API is. The Open Service Broker API is something that was created by Cloud Foundry and has been adopted within Kubernetes. And the idea is to be able to provision an arbitrary service and have the connection information and credentials then injected into some sort of workload. And I'm not sure if it makes perfect sense here, but potentially you could consider the service, like provisioning the service that creates the credentials for creating volumes as through the Open Service Broker pattern. So you would use Open Service Broker to get create a PD provisioner service, and then have the credentials injected into your CSI driver. But that's something we can consider like V2, V3.
That's good.
All right, cool. Anything else anybody wants to talk about?
Yeah, just quick thing. Sorry, I'm late, guys.
Sure, no problem.
I have to hop onto another call, so I'll sync with you guys later.
Okay, sounds good.
Okay. Yeah, a couple of things. The CSI Sanity program, I sent an email to the CSI mailing list. So I made it public that we have finished it. I gave some examples so we can continue from there. So that was good. Second thing is that I added a CSI Sanity CI style thing to the drivers as a PR, and it's failing right now. But it's we can merge it and we can fix it. But what I mean to say is that there's part of a CI system to run that on only host plugin as an example. So that's there.
That's awesome. That means these volume plugins are now being at least somewhat tested.
Yeah.
They if somebody makes a breaking change, it'll be caught.
Yeah, exactly. And just today, very late last night, I added it to our Portworx driver, and we found 2 issues on that one. So I fixed it and I added to our CI too.
Nice.
So that's good.
One question is when you are adding it to the CSI drivers, are you referencing, are you like copying over the code, or are you referencing the library somehow?
So yeah, so there's the good question. So there's 2 ways you can use CSI Sanity. One, which is the way I use it in Portworx, which is I include it as a library. Like I vendor it in, and then in my testing, my unit test, I use sanity.test, and I let it do whatever it needs to do.
Got it.
And instead, in the drivers, in Kubernetes CSI drivers, what I do is I do a wget, a curl on the compiled version of CSI Sanity as a program, okay? And then I run CSI Sanity --endpoint, and I point it to the host path.
Okay. I think that both of those options make sense. I have a slight preference for the vendoring because it prevents things from breaking.
Yeah.
But I can see it either way. And the other comment would be, David, keep an eye on this. This would be something good to include for the GPD driver.
Yeah, I'll definitely add it in a little later.
Yep.
Yeah, you'll see the PR still up there if you want to see the example.
Great.
Lastly is versioning. I have a versioning diff that I put on Slack.
Okay.
And Vlad and I talked about it. I think he's still on. Good. And all I did in it, after thinking about it, I said all I did was compare just the major and minor number instead of comparing major, minor number and patch, right? So I just dropped the patch and I only compare 0.1 instead of 0.1.0, right? Now, the discussion that we had between Vlad and I yesterday was, should we do that or should we just compare major numbers? Because major numbers are not supposed to have breaking API changes. But the thing is like it's not supposed to, but we're already talking about breaking API changes between 0.1 and 0.2.
Yeah. So I think for now, we definitely have to do both major and minor because pre 1.0, there is going to be breaking changes. And we know between 0.1, 0.2, there will be breaking changes.
Okay.
So for now, I think that change makes sense.
Until we release with 1.0?
With 1.0, then it can switch over to just major versions because between 1.0 and 2.0, everything should be backwards compatible.
Is that good, Vlad?
Yeah, that works.
Okay.
You just got to remember to come back to. Well, I mean,
yeah, exactly.
Create an issue to track it. Otherwise, we will lose track of it.
Yeah, it could be a year and a half before.
Yeah, but I think we probably should just go ahead and do the right thing right now and just check major, and because during the development iteration, pre-release, pre-GA, this thing's going to change anyway. So it probably doesn't make sense to check minor and patch anyway.
I have a question. We could have both right now. If it's 0 for the first major number.
Yeah.
Check, check major and minor. If it's
I see.
1.0 or later, I mean, if it's not 0, then only check major, and that's it.
Oh,
And then the code always works.
That seems reasonable.
Yeah. All right, I'll make that change.
Okay, cool.
That's all I have.
All right, thanks. All right, does anybody else have anything they want to talk about? All right, cool. Take care.
All right,
Bye-bye.
take care, guys. Bye-bye.
Talk to you tomorrow.
Bye-bye.
Bye.